Welcome back. We're going to be looking at chapter 15 of the book of Job. And as usual, I would just read and stop when I feel I've got comments. So from verse 1. Then Eliphaz the Temanite answered and said, so this man is spoken to Job before. I think this is the second round of response to Job. Now in verse 2 he said, should a wise man answer with empty knowledge and fill himself with east wind? And I just thought, what does it mean by empty knowledge? So it's as if they just expected Job to take everything that they're saying to him and not challenge their point of view. And so they're not happy. He's not happy that Job is responding with knowledge and understanding, standing up to them, to their doctrine that is false. So carrying on from verse 3 says, should he reason with unprofitable talk, or by speeches with which he can do no good? Yes, you cast off fear and restrain prayers before God, for your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you chose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. In what way? I don't really understand. What has Job said? What, in all the utterances that Job has made, I can't see any kind of incriminating statement in it that would suggest that what he's saying is proving him guilty of the fact that he is suffering from the sins that is committed, and that's the reason why all of this is come upon him. So I'm not quite sure what he means, because he carried on in verse 6 to say, your own mouth condemn you and not I, and your own lips testifies against you. So this man carried on in verse 7 and said, are you the first man who was born, or are you made before the hills? So he's talking about the order of creation. Of course, inanimate things were made before plants and animals. So, I think he's trying to say that you're trying to prove to us that you know everything. And now he's using creation to defend his speech. Have you heard the counsel of God? Do you limit wisdom to yourself? I think their expectation is that when they came to meet Job and found him in that state, they probably thought that, concluded, we don't know, maybe they had a conversation between themselves, these three friends, and came up with a conclusion that Job must have done something really bad for him to be in that terrible state. And so this is why they're going on and on about it. And they were not expecting Job to be able to defend himself and to say things to them. Maybe they were expecting, like I said earlier, that when they are coming up with all this explanation or reasons for why this has happened to him, they probably expect Job to say, okay, yeah, that's true. But they can't accept the fact that Job is not accepting their doctrine. So in verse 9 it says, what do you know that we do not know? Well, if they know the same things, then there shouldn't be this kind of conflict going on between them. So this is to suggest that knowledge is not enough. Knowledge of maybe how things work, because of creation, because they've used a lot of those, knowledge of, they've displayed a lot of knowledge that they have on creation and the order of things. But that's not sufficient you cannot replace that with your relationship with God and the kind of understanding that comes when you have an intimate relationship with God is different from head knowledge or the understanding of the principles of how things work in life. And that, I think, they are really falling short of. And so they can't understand why Job in this situation is not taking what they're saying. And it's simply because Job from what I have seen, has a relationship with God. So I think above all, there was somewhere earlier on that Job said, made a statement like Habakkuk made, then I will rejoice in the Lord always, though the fig trees are barren and the cattle all die. Job made a similar sentence that he's going to resign himself unto God. That is somebody that has faith or has a kind of relationship with the Lord. So he knows that God is good and that God, yes, he may have allowed this. He has a reason, and hopefully that the Lord will speak to him about it. That's why he's persisting in asking God or speaking, challenging God at some times. So going back to the first part of verse 9, it said, what do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not in us? Maybe he wasn't asking that question sincerely, because if he was asking that question sincerely, he should have listened to what Job is saying and, taking a leaf from there to see there must be more to what is happening than what we know or at the understanding that we have of the way things work, because that is what is keeping Job and making him not to succumb to their constant pressure that he must have done something wrong. So in verse 10, this man said, both the gray-haired and the aged are amongst us. Maybe this is probably suggesting that the other two are older than Job. I don't know, maybe that's what it means, but it looks like that. And much older than your father. In other words, well, in what he's saying here, we don't know if Job's father was still alive, because there's no reference to it. I haven't seen any reference to Job's father up until here. But that does not diminish from the story or from the happenings of what is going on with Job, or the story that we're reading, if his father is still alive. Anyway, so he carried on to say, are the consolations of God too small for you, and the word spoken gently with you? Okay, so in other words, we've been gently telling you about the fact that you've done something wrong, repent, so that the Lord will forgive you and restore you. But, Job is not giving in. So they are having rounds, because I think this is the second round of discourse that Job is having with this man, and the three of them. So all of them have had the first round, and now he's coming back again. So they're taking their time. They want to wear Job down. And I'm beginning to think, where is the empathy? Where is the wanting to be with your friend in a time like this? Why do they want to ram their understanding down his throat? There's no love in this. It does not suggest to me that they sincerely care about their friend Job. Now, carrying on, it says, are the consolation of God too small for you, and the words spoken gently with you? Why does your heart carry you away? And what do your eye wink at, that you turn your spirit against God? And let such words go out of your mouth. What words? Is it that he's questioning God, or saying the things that he's saying? Yes, I do not like the way that Job sometimes speaks as if he's wishing death. He certainly wanted to die. I don't like that. But I'm not in Job's shoes, and I'm not going to pretend that I know the way he was feeling with the scale of the experience, the loss that he has experienced. Neither are these men, so they should let him be. And I believe that one of the ways you can demonstrate that you love somebody is to allow them to be themselves. They're not allowing him to be himself. So their friendship, or the genuineness of their care, of their friendship with Job, is very questionable. What do you think? Just thinking about our everyday life now, I know that we're not living in isolation, and our relationship with people would necessitate us interacting and sometimes going through living experiences with people. But in the heart of all of this, or even in our relationship with people, we should still not lose our individuality, and be gracious enough to allow people to be themselves and to be able to make their decisions, to guide them through gently. This reminds me, I've been reading the book of Philemon and studying with a friend, and the way Paul handled Onesimus and the relationship between him and Philemon, I think just shows maturity, and that's the kind of thing I would have expected from this friend, because Paul, even though he was in a position to command Onesimus to go back to his master, Onesimus was a runaway slave, he also was in a position to command Philemon to take Onesimus back. But I'm sure that what I understood from that book is that Paul gave them persuaded them, gave them the opportunity to do the right thing, which was for Onesimus to go back to his master, because he was a runaway slave, and I think he stole something from his master. And he also wrote, as he wrote in that letter, we can see that Paul gave Philemon the choice. He was gently encouraging him to take Onesimus back and forgive him. And, even though he was saying that, he also said somewhere in Philemon that he was ready to pay Philemon back. So that is the reason why I thought maybe Onesimus stole something and he needed to restore what he stole. And Paul was offering to pay back if Philemon was not ready to forgive that theft and wanted his money back. I think that's the way we should allow, or we should relate to our friends, which Job's friends here are not doing. They're not giving Job that grace at all. They're just trying to ram up their understanding, their doctrine, which is false, has a faulty foundation. They're trying to ram it off Job's throat. And I'm happy that Job was able to stand up to them and not, even though he was vulnerable and in a state where he could easily have succumbed, he knew enough. Possibly he knew his God. That's why he was able to stand up to them. And the lesson for me here is that, as children of God, we should endeavor to develop our relationship with God, know who we are, know the capacity that the Lord has placed in us, and the extent that God would go for us, because that knowledge helps us to take bold step. A bold step like Job is taking now. And this is what I'm getting from this chapter, at least so far, with what the friends are saying to Job. What do you think? So now in verse 14, he said, "What is man that he could be pure? And he who is born of a woman that he could be righteous? If God puts no trust in his saints, and the heavens are not pure in his sight." I think this man is completely wrong here, because now we know from having read the beginning of this book that the very reason why Job is in this situation is because the Lord trusted him. The Lord trusted him and said to Satan, "Have you seen my son, my servant Job? He is perfect, is this. He hates evil, he ensures evil." And it was because of that that Satan said, oh, it's because you've not done this to him, you've not allowed this to happen to him. But we see now that God was right about Job, because the second time Satan went to meet the Lord, God said the same again, exact same thing, that Job is still standing, he's perfect. And Satan said, oh, okay, it's because you haven't touched his health. And of course, that's why he now has this health problem. So we see here, if God called Job perfect, this man doesn't know that that we can be, considered perfect by the Lord. So they're the ones that have limited knowledge and understanding of God. And they're the ones that have shaky doctrines. And that's why they're taking the stand that they're taking with Job. Because we're saints. We are saints. Job is a saint. And it says here, if God puts no trust in his saints and the heavens are not pure in his sight, how much less man who is abominable and filthy, who drinks iniquity like water? Is he saying that this is the stand of Job? That is very false, because even the very first person that had the conversation with Job talked about all the things that Job, gave a very, very elaborate CV of Job's works and his activities that suggest that he feared God, credentials that support what God said. He was a counselor to people. He didn't allow people. Of course, he was a man of means, and he used this means to support the less able. That testimony was there. And all of those things, the Tima, I think, the first one that spoke, said, now you do all of these things. He was laying all those foundations to say to Job that now is your turn to experience hardship. You need to take it. So even though he said all those things, it still proved, even though his reason for saying all those things was to, turn the table on Job to say that now you should bear your loss, he still said it as good as Job's, standing, as his character that was flawless. So this cannot be true. So I wonder what the state of the mind of these people are that call Job's friend, because they're going all out now and beginning to malign and deform, I don't know what's the word to say, that defaming his character, because this is not the Job that we know. And he's trying to say that he does abominable things and filthy. That's not Job. So carrying on, he said in verse 17, I will tell you, hear me, what I have seen, I will declare. Okay, so what did he say? What wise man have told, not hiding anything received from their father, to whom alone the land was given, and no alien passed amongst them. The wicked man reads with pain all his days. That's not true, because of two things. Number one, we know in this world, and a lot of record of things that we have recorded in things, men and experiences of men we have recorded in scriptures, of men that were not good and they did not reach with pain in his days. So it could only have said this to mean that Job is wicked, and that's why he's experiencing this. But we know it is not true as well. So let's carry on. And the number of years is hidden from the oppressor. Dreadful sounds are in his ears. In prosperity, the destroyer comes upon him. I think he's been very malicious here. Verse 22, he does not believe that he will return from darkness, for a sword is waiting for him. He wanders about for bread, saying, where is it? He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Trouble and anguish make him afraid. They overpower him like a king ready for battle, for he stretches out his hand against God and acts defiantly against the Almighty. What's he talking about? I don't know what it means by all of these things he's saying. What do you think? So carry on in verse 26, it said, running stubbornly against him with a strong embossed shield, though he has covered his face with fatness and made his wrists heavy with fat. He dwells in desolate cities, in houses with which no one inhabits, which are destined to become ruins. He will not be rich, nor his wealth continue, nor his possessions overspread the earth. He will not depart from darkness, and the flame will dry out his branches, and by the breath of his mouth he will go away. Let him not trust in futile things, deceiving himself, for futility will be his reward. It will be accomplished before his time, and his branch will not be green. Now, I like to stop here and see the record of what Job said in chapter 14, verses 7 to 9. It says there, for there is hope for a tree, and if it is cut down, that it will sprout again, and that its tender shoot will not cease, though his roots may grow old in the earth, and his stump may die in the ground, yet in the scent of water it will bud and bring forth branches like a plant. So Job was saying that, even though the reason he was saying that was because he thought there's no hope for him, that even a cut down tree has hope, that he doesn't have hope. But this is where you would know. This is where you will know that his friends don't have good intentions for him, because this man is now saying that his branch will not be green. And all of the things he's been saying is just to justify that Job is a wicked man, and so this is the end of him. We know he cannot be he's very wrong, because we know the end of Job, even though they didn't know at this point in their lives and where they were having all this conversation. Even Job did not, I don't think he would have imagined how the Lord would turn his situation around. But these are supposed to be men that came to sympathize or empathize with him. And the words of their mouth, the things they're saying to him, does not come close to the kind of word you would expect from somebody that's come to empathize or, mourn and pay homage to their friend that's supposed to have experienced a great loss. And it just goes to show that they didn't have a good heart towards Job. And then you question their relationship with God as well.